pod bay doors, please, Hal.
ArmchairCinema.com and also ArmchairOscars.com. And joining me as always from the depths is my ever-present co-host, the critic and historian for TalkMovieToMe.com, Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, but what will you do when those in the depths rise up against you?
I work in retail. I'm in the depths already. We are talking about a real classic today. We're talking about 1927 Fritz Lang's Metropolis. And boy, this movie means a lot to me, and it means a lot to a lot of people who've seen it. But before I get into my long-winded explanation of how I saw this, how did you come to this film, sir?
Reputation. I knew of it, and I bought a really cheap $5 DVD in like the year 2000.
Was it Good Times Video?
I don't think it was, but it might have been. It had a gold.
Oh, you'd know if it was Good Times.
It had a gold It had a gold cover, gold outline to the picture, and it was rotten quality, so it might have been. I didn't watch it for many years until like 2004. I finally put it in. Watched maybe an hour of it, slept through half an hour of it, and watched the last hour, half an hour of it. This is the 2-hour cut, so this is in 2004, when my son was still a baby, an infant, really, newborn almost, and didn't see it again until like last night and this morning. Despite having had the restored 2010 cut for probably about 6 years. Just never got around to it because the length is
That's the joy of
daunting.
this show. That's the joy of this show. It gets us off our butts to watch something either we haven't seen in forever or we we either haven't seen or haven't seen forever.
Right.
And you're doing that a lot with movies I've been meaning to get around to, and I'm glad I got you back to this movie.
Yeah, me too. Because it was it was fun watching it now, being able to basically pinpoint uh, at least a dozen movies that I could see direct influences
Oh, more than
that
that,
that
my
this
God,
I mean just
whole generations of
looking at a
cinemas.
cursory glance at it, you can say, okay, well, George Lucas based Coruscant off of Metropolis, and C-3PO was based off of the Machine Man, and
The girl bot.
yeah, and you know
You can
there.
see the influences. You can see the influences on everything. I mean, Blade Runner, Star Wars, Batman, Frankenstein. You can see all of those. I mean, it's
Modern times, just
modern times.
9 years
God.
later, yeah.
Yeah, this movie. I mean, and it's it's almost like live theater.
Yeah,
It's 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 so big, and that you see all these enormous sets, and there's all these big performances. And it's so great because it's like it is. It's like you're in a theater,
hmm
like you're in live theater. Um, I just came to that the last time I saw the film.
How did you come to it the first time, though?
Oh boy. Well, if you were listening to our Frankenstein episode, then you know that I came to that film when I had flu, and it was on AMC, and I would watch it over and over and over again. And that film became a catalyst for me because I would watch it, um, and it really became the launching pad for taking movies seriously. And uh, people who are around my age love to talk. I love to dig into nostalgia a little bit. I'm nostalgic for the old video stores,
Yeah.
and there was something magical. If you were really looking for something different, something new and different, there was something magical about walking into a video store, walking right past the new releases, going all the way to the back of the store,
Going into the middle, into the core, and just
right, or into the back, and
yeah.
you could find all these dusty old boxes, and which you could find some great stuff there, and
It would just
you
depend on how far back you went in some video stores.
right,
You c-
right,
you couldn't
right,
go all the way back because you
yeah.
know.
Well, not in Alabama.
Ah,
um,
well, up here in
when you see a beaded
Pennsylvania,
curtain,
there was.
when you see a beaded curtain, you know what you're going to get.
Yep.
But I I didn't go to Blockbuster very often because I didn't like Blockbuster. I didn't like the policies, and because they would shrink down the volume of their older films in order to have 73 copies of a brand new release.
Oh yeah,
That
I worked for Blockbuster for about 4 summers. Uh, I know exactly what they did.
that always bothered me.
You know what
It's like
bothered me working
mm,
there was how they decided what a new release was and their alphabetizing,
yeah,
because the wall they never let me do the new release wall because I would have completely changed it.
yeah.
Because it was
If you had a movie that came out and it made a lot of money at the box office, like Batman, there would be an entire wall devoted to nothing but Batman. And that
yeah,
always bugged me.
yeah.
I hated Blockbuster. And the whole Last Temptation of Christ thing bothered me too. But that's for another episode.
Another episode very soon.
But yeah, coming up very soon. But I kept walking around this Blockbuster because I would go with a friend of mine, and I would be interested in older stuff. Well, I kept walking by this um, this blue box. I didn't know what it was. It had a woman on it that looked like C-3PO,
Mm-hmm.
and it had the words Metropolis written above it in these beautiful Art Deco letters. And I thought at one point my immediate reaction was, "Oh, the hell with it. Let's just try it out." I didn't even know it was silent. But if you know anything, if you know even a small bit about science fiction, you've heard of this movie.
Yeah, yeah, you have.
It's one of those movies you've heard of it even if you've never seen it.
Mm-hmm. You've seen parts of it,
So
even if you've never seen
I was spending the night at my friend's house, and I grab this movie and I take it over to his house. I sit down and watch it. I am mesmerized.
it. Mm-hmm.
I am like John Belushi in the church in the Blues Brothers. I am seeing the light. You know
did
that's
you
it
did you
was.
did you start doing cartwheel flips down the hallway?
If I could, I would. You know? But it was literally like a religious experience because I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is mesmerizing. Now you have to understand also, it was the I won't say unfortunately, but it was the 1984 edition, which was had a score by Giorgio Moroder, and it had a lot of these rock songs
Mm-hmm.
by. What's interesting is the movie is a silent movie from the 20s, and it's the songs in the movie in that edition that are now outdated, and the movie is
Yeah.
not. So the songs were like by Adam Ant and
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie Tyler and Loverboy, Freddie Mercury,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very, very, very mid '80s songs, and they don't distract. It's an interesting edition. It's not a great edition, but anyway, underneath that is this movie that is not like nothing I've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
It was a stunning experience, and my friend is sitting there. He's doing whatever. I think he was on his computer, and he could care less about this movie. I'm sitting there having the moment that is changing my life, and this movie stayed in my head, and I became a prophet. I wanted everyone to see it, but as soon as they heard it was silent, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
They,
Yeah, that's true.
they won't none of it. I went back to that Blockbuster, and I said, "Can I buy that movie from you?" Because it was out of print.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Can I buy that movie from you?" And they looked it up, and they talked to the manager. And, it was one of those simple-faced kids. I'll have to talk to the manager.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
know,
I was one of those kids.
I bought it. I took it home. I watched it over and over and over again, and I still have it
Oh my goodness, there it is.
right here in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
I still have it. The tape looks like crap. It's a VHS. The tape looks like crap. But it just became this catalyst for me wanting. I kept trying to find other experiences like this, and it was the first silent movie I ever saw.
Hmm.
And I love silent film, by the way. And I just got interested in it, and its imagery is incredible. Its story is universal. This
Mm-hmm.
movie has no subtlety. There's
No.
no subtlety in this movie at all. None. Because it's big images, it's big performances, the message is huge.
Fritz Lang was not a subtle filmmaker.
No, he was not.
He
He was
never
not.
was. I mean, this was this was one of his last silent films, if I remember correctly. Because his first talkie
When,
was
when when sound came in, they wanted to put sound on it,
right,
and he said absolutely not. I
right.
wouldn't hear of it because he said the performances and everything is modulated. The rhythms of the film are
Hmm.
made to be silent.
Hmm. His first talkie was Germany's first talkie, and that was my favorite foreign language film, M, from 1931.
That movie is
Um,
devastating.
oh God, that's in contention for one of our October movies for
Yeah.
for 2018. I adore M, and I think it's funny. Like this is the first director that we are actually tackling one of his best known movies first. Uh,
Mhm.
we've only really done that with John Huston and Sam Peckinpah previously. Like every other person.
Well, we might have done that with Spielberg. His first movie was
Uh,
Jurassic Park, but everybody knows Jurassic Park.
yeah,
it wasn't. It's not the top of the line in his work, but it's uh,
I think we would have had to talk about like Jaws, Close Encounters, or E.T. first to be his best known,
yeah,
though.
yeah.
But
Um,
we tend to
this
we
film,
tend to go off radar when we introduce directors to our
yeah, the way
series
these things are done, the way these things are selected is it just comes to us at the
here.
moment. Like I want to do this film. It's not selected as I want to get into. It's not usually selected as I want to get into Fritz Lang. It's just selected as oh, I want to talk about Metropolis. And I had a great experience because the last time I saw this was a few years ago. I saw it in the Virginia Theater at Ebertfest
Oh wow.
with a brand new score by the Alloy Orchestra. And seeing it in a theater with with 200 other people, that's an experience.
I'm sure it is.
It's one thing to sit in your living room with it. It's another to experience it with people.
Right. Yeah. That's been a defining factor for me with a lot of films. Uh, Taxi Driver being one of them.
Film should be community in a lot of ways. It was one of the best experiences. It was the opening night film at Ebertfest
Oh wow.
that year, and the new score just it was beautiful. The print was beautiful. It was the restored 2010 print,
Right.
and it was the first time it had ever been. I think it was one of the first times it had been shown publicly. If you don't know, this film has been put back together through history piecemeal
Yeah.
because the prints that have been around have been damaged, so damaged that they couldn't. I don't think we'll ever see the absolute complete final version of this. Even
No.
the Ultimate Edition, the 2010, is still not the whole thing.
No, there's still parts that are missing, but it's not. It's like 25 minutes was restored to it, and they re-edited it um, based on I think a shooting script
Mm.
and other prints that they'd found that were closer to the edit. Because as right near when it came out, uh, they cut like I don't know 30, 40 minutes from it,
Mm.
and not just like one chunk in the middle that took out a subplot. It was like little bits all the way
Yeah.
through, and, and like I said,
Seeing,
I've not seen this enough to know what they added and what wasn't there. This isn't Star Wars. This isn't Lord of the Rings, which I can
right.
still sit and watch, even though I've seen the special editions and the extended editions a lot times more than the original versions. Uh, well, maybe not for Star Wars, but uh, I can still tell you exactly what scenes were not in the theatrical version.
The
This I can't
1984
do.
version, unfortunately, they tried to do this thing. They did this with The Star Is Born, the Judy Garland film. They
Which
don't
I
have they
yeah.
don't have the film version. They don't have the film, so they try to do stills,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really jarring in the middle of the movie because it stops and you just get this picture with some dialogue.
But they still have the dialogue. I actually really like what they did with a Star Is Born. Um,
It was distracting for me.
it wasn't for me.
They try to do that with this. There's a scene where Fraderson's one of the character in the movie. Fraderson's one of
Hmm.
his friends, the Yoshiwara,
Yeah.
and he gets caught up and he gets lost in the lights and glitter and what have you.
Well, he was supposed to go see Josephat, but
Yeah,
because he was a worker and dug in his pockets and found more money than he'd ever seen in his life, he's like, "Well, I'm gonna go party."
yeah. In the '84 version, all you see is a still of him sitting in a you see a still of him sitting in a taxi cab looking out the window,
Oh, really?
and it gives you a title card to tell you what happened to him,
Hmm.
and it's done very interesting. I mean, they do it very interesting. It's like the image fades in, and then the dialogue fades in next to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it cuts away to a title card. There's
Right.
very little of that I noticed in this movie. He does hold back. He did hold back on the title card. The great
Mm-hmm.
did,
Yeah.
and let
There's
the visual do the driving.
Right, he really did, and there's a lot of scenes where you can see people animatedly talking, but then it doesn't cut to a title card to say like what they're doing. It's like, okay, all right,
I had a
all right.
I had a dumb American moment because when I watch Chaplin or Keaton or Harold Lloyd, because I'm a big fan of Harold Lloyd, I'll watch their films and I'm watching their mouth.
Hmm.
I'm trying to see if what they're saying fits with the title card. I tried to do this with Metropolis, and
But then
I
you
couldn't.
realize that it was in German.
They're speaking German. Okay, dummy, they're speaking German. Yeah.
I'll do that with American movies too. Harry Langdon is another one to check out.
Love Harry Lang.
I just finally saw a handful of his films for the first time. I found a collection in the library, and I was like, well, I need to see this because I know of him, but I've never seen any of his stuff. He was talented. Uh,
I'm. We should talk about where this film came from, the 2010 edition,
yes.
because I, I'm one of those people. I keep up with the films that are found.
Mm-hmm. I
The
try
ones
to.
that the silent films that they'll find in somebody's attic or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, or in somebody's private collection,
Mm.
whatever.
A few
And
years ago, they found an Alfred Hitchcock movie, Silent, that it was
really,
thought to
I
be
didn't know that.
lost. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but it was one of his early ones that they thought was lost, but they actually found a print of it somewhere.
Yeah, they found a film a couple of years ago called Beyond the Rocks,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a screen pairing of Valentino and Gloria Swanson.
Oh wow.
The movie was terrible, but I'm glad we have it.
Yeah.
Um, but I kept noticing there was a pattern to these films that were found. Is that they will all seem to end up in South America,
Mm-hmm.
and I kept trying to figure out why. Well, when I went to Ebert Fest, the restoration people were there, and I said, "Why Argentina? Why South America?" And it was explained to me that um, these films used to go on the road.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do. It wasn't until the 1970s that they had the concept of opening wide.
Mm-hmm.
Like nowadays, what Wonder Woman
Mm-hmm.
will open on 2,000 screens at the same
Right.
time,
Right.
and then it will jump the pond and it will go. It'll do a wider opening in Europe and then
Mm-hmm.
in Asia and what have you. Um, these films used to go on the road, and they would travel around for years.
Mm-hmm.
So I might live in Alabama, and Casablanca comes out and premieres in L.A. in 1942, 43.
43.
Well, I might not see it until 1947.
Right.
That's the way it was.
Yeah. There was a great documentary. Um, I guess it did the festival circuit in 2016, but it got an official release in 2017 called Dawson City Frozen Time, directed by Bill Morrison. It was one of the nominees for 2017 for Best Documentary from the Online Film Critics Society that I happened to get to see. And it talks about this little town in the frozen tundra of the Yukon that was a gold rush town that was like the last stop for a lot of silent movies. They found hundreds of silent movies that the studios just didn't want them back. They didn't want to
Yeah,
spend the money on return envelopes, so they were told up in the city to destroy them. But the owner of the theater was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to destroy them.
yeah.
I'm gonna hold on
Destroy a
to them."
movie.
And a lot of them ended up getting destroyed in a fire, but they saved a whole bunch of them too. And I think that that's how a lot of these things end up, in other countries from their origin in better condition and in a different cuts, different editions, because the studios were just like, well, these are just paltry entertainment. We don't want them back. You just destroy them when the run's over. And
Yeah,
sometimes they
there was
did,
no
and sometimes they didn't.
concept. there was no concept of reissues.
Right.
And of course, there was no such thing as home video.
Right.
And the reason South America is because a lot of these films would end up there
Mm-hmm.
for that reason.
Yeah.
That's just where the roadshow stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody would grab it, and it would end up in their private collection. It would
Mm-hmm.
be passed around, and what have you. Metropolis went through so many edits and so many cuts because of the regions that it was in. Somebody would cut it for time, somebody would cut it for content.
Mm-hmm.
This version that I have right here, this VHS version, is 87 minutes long.
Ouch.
Yeah. And the one you saw is over 2.5 hours long.
Uh, well, the first one I saw was about 2 hours. It was an
Okay.
even 120 minutes. This one was 148 minutes.
Okay. The
With
one
the
I saw at Ebert Fest was well over 2 hours.
Yeah, the one that you saw at Ebert Fest was the one I just got done watching.
Right.
It was about it's close to 2.5 hours, and it's worth it.
But
I mean,
it
it's
was discovered in somebody's private collection, and when it went in for restoration, there were some. There was the end of one reel when they were trying to restore it. There was the end of one reel that was so badly damaged they couldn't even. There was nothing they could do with it.
hmm
That's what happens. These were nitrate prints,
right.
and they deteriorate.
hmm
And if you ever see those specials about film preservation, you'll see where they open the can, and it looks like just a pile of black dust.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Soon as it hits the air, because if you close a film canister right, it's kind of airtight,
yeah,
and as soon as it's exposed to air, it just dust.
yeah, yeah.
That's why a lot of
Um,
times they open them up in a controlled vacuum in special suits so that
yeah,
that they don't destroy them until and they get them scanned in to the computer before the whole stock just disintegrates.
right, right. It was, and it's film preservation is a subject that I have a very much an interest in because
Me too.
these were the first movies.
Yeah.
When movies are around 500 years from now, we're gonna want to know where they started.
Right. And
You know,
what is it? They speculate that about over 90% of silent films that were made are lost
that breaks my heart.
because when they were still cranking them out and they were only 10 minutes long, if they needed a fire on stage, they would throw in a nitrate print because nitrate burned so well. They would just throw that in. Even though safety stock existed in the silent era, it was cheaper to use the nitrate, and they didn't switch over to safety stock until the 40s.
And
When too many people died in theater fires, they were like, well, maybe we should we should use this.
the greatest the greatest promotion for film preservation is Martin Scorsese's Hugo.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
It's a movie about a kid. It's a fantasy. It's about a kid who finds George Méliès working in a train station,
Mm-hmm.
and he's retired, and he kind of brings him back and uh, pulls up an interest in his films, and that kind of stuff happened
Mm-hmm.
because there was a time when smaller theaters would get a hold of these films and they would bring them back,
Mm-hmm.
and people would get interested in them.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about Frankenstein, when Universal was sold off, there was this little theater, I think in Texas, that one time just out of the blue just collapsed on a Saturday night, just decided to show Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein and I think King Kong,
Ooh.
and it was a massive
Oh,
success.
that'd be
Held
a
over
hell
for
of a night.
weeks.
Oh man.
Yeah, held over for weeks, and one hell of a movie night. Yeah, and people would be interested, and the studios were like, hey, let's pull out some of this inventory
Mm-hmm.
and send some of these movies back around. People might like these,
Mm-hmm.
and that began the restoration.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not restoration, but
Reissuing.
reissuing.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have home video, and we're trying to hold on to whatever anything that we can.
Anything and everything good, bad, or ugly. We want we want it.
You want it.
And look,
One of the first movies ever to win the Academy Award is missing. It's a drama called The Way of All Flesh.
oh yeah,
Emil Jannings won the Oscar for that.
yeah,
Because back then, actors won the Oscar for several films.
right, for performances in in multiple films to
They would
avoid
say,
multiple nominations and
yeah,
canceling them out.
they would say, Emil Jannings nominated for, this movie. It would be Emil Jannings nominated for this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was The Way of All Flesh, which the print has lost. And I think it's the only Oscar winner ever lost.
Really? Wow.
No print exists of it.
That's a travesty.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think getting back to Metropolis, for anybody who doesn't know what this is about,
Where have
uh,
you been?
a basic plot synopsis is there are two caste systems. There's the oligarchy that lives in the upper city, and the workers who man the machines that keep the oligarchy's uh, electricity on and their lives easy, while they slave and toil for 10 hours a day. Uh, they walk
Literally slave and toil.
slave and toil. They walk in, they shuffle into the factory, and they limp out. Like there's
Heads
no.
down, heads down, moving in unison,
Hmm. There's
shuffling.
there's no joy. There's no personality. There's no. Uh, there's nothing. Um, and the son of the creator of this metropolis, uh, his name is Frederson. Or
What a name.
I'm
Blissfully unaware.
wow, that's as bad as a name as former Minnesota Governor Tommy Thompson. Like,
Yeah.
come on. But
Uh,
yeah, blissfully unaware until this kind of revolutionary figure uh, from down in the depths where the workers are, this pretty teacher brings these worker children up into what they call the Garden of the Suns, which is just this haven that appears to basically be an outdoor brothel for the kids of the people that run this city.
yeah,
Uh,
it's sort of a big playground. They're
right.
running around, and
The
you see them out
the
there,
upper 10,000 as they're
right?
called.
You see them out there running track, and they're doing all of these. They're just playing out. They're not doing anything. They're rich
Right.
kids out playing.
Right. And these girls put on like Seven Veils style dances, and you know they're who's going to entertain Freder today, and the girls are like, I am. And so she brings up these ragged and dirty children um, into this sanctuary of wealth, and Freder is immediately smitten with Maria.
Oh, and she is the image. Like I said, this movie has no subtlety. She is like the absolute image of complete and total purity.
Right.
I mean, she is. When you see her, you see her first coming out the door with the children, and then they do this close up where she's sort of by herself, and she's looking around, and I mean, it might as well come out of a biblical painting. I mean, she's almost got this glow around her. You know?
And so he becomes obsessed with her, so he wants to go down into the depths. Like he's aware that there are workers doing stuff, but he doesn't know what they have to do. So he trades places with this guy who just moves clock hands to blinking lights. I want to say,
He doesn't move clock hands he moves these two levers at the same time around a circular disc,
but
and he
when
moves them
only when
around.
they when the lights light up at certain numbers, he has to put it in front,
Right,
put it to that.
right.
It's the absolute most 1920s, 1930s idea of what the future machinery will be. There's no concept of automation whatsoever. That the people have to do these menial things and work themselves literally to death. Uh,
And they cannot stop
and they
because
can't
if they
stop.
stop, the machinery will explode.
Yeah, the pressure builds up and the machinery explodes. So they have to have a constant workforce. Uh, so he takes over this guy's job and he says, "Hey, here's my clothes, well, trained clothes, and you go meet my buddy who just got fired by my dad uh, at his place, and I'll come and get you in the morning." Well, Gregor finds that there's a whole bunch of money and pamphlets in the pockets. He sees this club and he's like, "I'm gonna go to the club. Forget Josephat's house."
Yoshiwara.
Yoshimata, and so and this is like a den of sin. Uh,
Oh my god. By the way, what he's telling you is also seen through this imagery that is breathtaking.
it's it's I mean, this is just cursory plot stuff. Then you
When you see the
find,
machine in this, when
oh
you see the machine in this, you see these little windows in the machine, and you see the people moving back and forth, and they are
yeah,
literally moving like gears.
uh-huh.
They're moving this way and that way, this way and that way. They're literally, it's like a music video.
Mm-hmm. And
It's almost like a dance.
it ends up, um, there's a mad inventor who was in love with Joe Frederer's
His
wife,
name,
Joh, Joe.
yeah, Yo,
Joe,
yeah,
yo, and so he creates some sort of a robot replica of Hell, Hel,
Roxanne.
Hel is her name. Yes,
The scientist is named Roxanne.
yes, who is played by none other than uh, Rudolph Klein-Rogue, who played not only Dr. Mabuse in Fritz Lang's Dr. Mabuse Der Spieler, or The Gambler, and The Testament of Dr. Mabuse, but also the Doctor in The Doctor of Caligari, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and is also Fritz Lang's wife at the time's ex-husband.
Right.
Thea von Harbo uh, married Fritz Lang, and then she joined the Nazi Party when she was having an affair with an Indian, not a Native American, but an Indian. Uh, he found out about him. He emigrated to the U.S. They divorced in '33. She married this guy at the same time as joining the Nazi Party, which disparaged her marriage to this guy. Um, which she says
She joined. She joined the Nazi Party. She was in sympathy with it because there was a time early on when the Nazi Party was not a gang of murderers.
well, she later said that she joined it so that she could work behind the scenes to ease the troubles of Indians within the Reich.
Indian immigration.
Yeah, Indian immigration in the Reich, because her husband, which she married clandestinely. Uh, I mean, there's the intrigue of Thea von Harbo's life could be a movie and should be a
Yeah,
movie. Uh,
I was reading a little bit about her life, and it was fascinating. They got divorced because Fritz Lang divorced her because essentially because he caught her with this man.
he walked in while she was in bed
Walked
with
in,
him,
yeah,
and
and
and then she
over
joined the
time,
Nazis, and
right,
it's like
and
he's
he left Germany because of that.
right.
But
So
getting back to the story,
anyway, uh, so he has created what he calls the Machine Man, despite the fact that it's a woman, um, and he's going to make it look like a real human and pass for a real human, and they kidnap Maria after they find that she's some sort of a John the Baptist for the workers, saying
the
that there's a
biblical references in this movie. Oh my
this
God!
this is this let me tell you something. This is how you do a Jesus story allegory instead
Yeah,
of, say, oh, the Matrix Revolutions, which The iconography in that is just maddening.
Yeah.
But this, it
This is one of the
really,
best biblical epics you've ever seen.
yeah, and it works on that level, and it works on a whole bunch of other levels. So they
Yeah.
kidnap her because Fredder's in love with her, and she's got power over the workers, and they transfer her consciousness and her likeness into this robot who does a very lascivious dance that
Oh my
entices
God.
every single man. The anytime if anybody ever does a video essay on the horrors of the male gaze, they just
Mhm.
need to put this scene in, and that's
Right.
it. Like that's your whole
Because you
video
see
essay.
basically what it is. She's basically the whore of Babylon,
Yeah.
simply. And she's dancing around. The robot copy of her is in this dance club, and she's dancing around on this giant stone pillar.
With pasties on her nipples undulating wildly. I mean, it is just. And then these men are
Which is currently on my T-shirt, by the way. Uh,
and these men end up like killing each other and themselves over
oh, and
just
you see them
her.
looking at her. You see them looking at her, and
Oh,
there's just close-ups of their eyes.
yeah. I mean, they're practically drooling,
Yeah,
and it's like, and then she has control over the upper part, and then she
mhm,
gains control over the lower part.
right,
All because the inventor hates Fredder Senior,
right.
Yo, and
Fell in love with a woman named Hell, ATL. Um, fell in love with her. The ruler of Metropolis stole her away from him and married her, and then she ended up dying
in childbirth,
in childbirth, giving birth to
Fredder.
Praetor. And that's where that consternation comes
There's
from.
this. I mean, it's just there's so much
This
going
movie's
on in this
insane.
movie. It's, there's so much going on in this. You would never believe that it's from 1927. If it were a talkie and in color, you would think that it would have been made 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Like it's just. I mean, eventually this leads to a revolt by the workers that gets then thwarted, and then Freder works as a mediary between the workers and his father, the head and the hands. He is the heart that brings them together. It's I mean he's basically playing a Jesus figure. Uh,
and
I
you
mean,
have this thing where the workers are being kept away from a revolt
hmm
by Maria, who gives these lectures, again with biblical references, surrounded by crosses.
yeah. I mean they
And
read from the Bible.
she's down in the depths, and she's giving these lectures to the workers. Don't rise up against the people up in the upper echelon
Because the
in the city.
mediator will come.
The mediator will come. Subtle. Um, the mediator will come. That there's got to be an understanding,
hmm
not violence.
hmm
Now, when the doctor, when the Rothwang, when the mad scientist clones her and turns her into this robot, which by the way, she looks exactly like the robot looks exactly like the real thing.
hmm hmm
She goes down into the depths and she gives a different lecture to tell them to rise up.
Yeah, the mediator's not coming. You've waited long
Right?
enough. Rise up, destroy the machines.
She becomes Hitler, basically.
Basically, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, so uh, they do, and in their rush to, I guess, try to give themselves at least maybe a better life, or at least they're caught up in this rabid mob mentality, they end up practically almost dooming their children to a watery grave.
right, because they destroy the machinery and start the flood.
And it starts a flood in the workers' city, which is where all their children are,
Mm-hmm.
only saved by Freder, Maria, and Josephat.
Right, because they catch the robot, they realize the robot is not the real thing, and they put her on a bonfire
They
and
burn
they
her at the
burn her at the
stake.
stake. And when they
but
burn her at the stake, the skin comes off and she's a robot
yeah,
again.
but Lang plays that for at least 10 minutes with you thinking that they might have gotten the real Maria.
Right. Right.
And because you can't tell because it's silent and there's she didn't manipulate her voice to be a little different so that you know what the difference is. I thought that they actually got the wrong person. I thought that they were going to kill Maria. Maybe that's my bleakness bleeding through. Like if this was made in the 70s, that's exactly what would have happened. She would have been turned
Yeah.
into Soylent Green or something. But I think so, and then there's this big rooftop fight between Freder and Rotgang.
It
Uh,
goes on and on and on
oh my
forever.
gosh! Until finally Rotgang is finally killed, and Freder brings his father and Grot, the guardian of the heart machine. He's like the head worker. Together with a handshake, like,
Well,
and that's
Maria brings them together, and she
right.
says, "What is the line? Between the head and the heart, the
The
um,
heart, yeah, the mediator between the head and the hands must be the heart.
right? Not subtle.
Not at
That's where
all.
the movie ends.
Yeah,
That's
that's
where the
it.
movie ends.
That's it. The end.
But in between this,
It's like,
but in
okay, so what
between this,
happens to the workers? Do they get better working conditions? Do they get, what do they do?
you're kind of left to figure it out,
Like they are, I bet.
like they are. It's like, well, what do we do now? Because, but we
It's
should
like
tell
at
you,
the end
we've
of
run through.
it's like at the end of Finding Nemo when they get out of the tank and they're in those
Yeah.
plastic bags and they're in the harbor. Now what?
Now what?
They can't get out of the bags.
Yeah. Now what? Well, now we've blown through this plot,
Oh yeah, there's. I
but
mean,
what
it
what happens in between is
it fills 2.5 hours easily, which
oh, it does.
I was shocked. Like watching it like I was last night and this morning. Um, I couldn't believe how quickly it got to Maria coming up and Freder taking Gregor 11811's position.
Yeah,
Like it's within the first 20 minutes.
because he takes his place, and again, we're talking about the dial machine. And he takes those two arms and swings them around like clock arms, and he has to meet them and join them with the lights around the edges as they
Right.
come on and go off. And
It looks like a terrible arcade game, is what.
it looks like a terrible arcade game. And then the day goes on, and he gets so weary that he begins having delusion, and he imagines that this dial is a clock, and he
Yeah,
starts trying to push the hands toward
and he
5 o'clock.
can't do it, and so this one 10-hour shift.
Mm-hmm.
This is the height of rich privilege. One
Yeah,
10-hour shift. And he's like, I'm on the worker's side. This is terrible. I know exactly what you feel like. I know exactly what you've been through. It's like you did it once. They've been doing it their entire adult lives. Day in
shut up.
and day out. You don't know anything.
Well, I think they're basically they're trying to illustrate that. Yeah, I get it. I kind of get it. And they're
It's like
trying to put
if
this
this is as bad for me once, I can only imagine having to do this for
right.
10, 20, 30 years.
I just did it for 10 hours. You've been doing it your whole life. I kind of get it.
Yeah, yeah.
And but let's talk about the religious imagery because it's astonishing. Because you have these images like when Rotfang creates the robot, she's sitting in a chair, and above her head, behind her, is a giant pentagram,
Yeah.
and there's all these. What was that? What's that old saying? Beware a wolf in sheep's clothing,
Hmm.
which is essentially what this is. And there's this when Maria's talking to the workers, the good Maria. She says, she tells them about the Tower of Babylon, and there's this massive, massive cutaway to the story of Babylon. You see the Tower of Babylon with
Tower
these
of
thousands and
the
thousands and thousands
the
of people
yeah
walking away.
the Tower of Babel, the mind, the brains couldn't build it, so they contracted for a wage, uh, people to build it, the hands, and it's absolutely just not only that, but do you remember that Yo works in the new Tower of Babel?
Hmm. Yes.
It's like, and she doesn't. I mean, she doesn't even end up telling the story the way that it is. It's one of those manipulations of religious texts to fit a purpose, because she just says that they contracted them, and this they became the hands and the brains were separated, and the mediator has to be the heart. She leaves out the fact that this was supposed to be a tower to God, and they were all stricken with different language. It's basically an allegory for why people spoke different languages,
Yeah.
because they couldn't figure out different regions would develop different etymologies of speech. Um, so there had to be a tower, and God said, "You
Yeah.
can't talk to each other because I don't want you building it to heaven."
Well,
Like that was really a threat. Like,
but the thing is, she does not. Even at that, the story that she tells is seen with this visual that is
it's
breathtaking.
beautiful. The Fritz Lang was probably he and Murnau were probably the best visual filmmakers. Uh, they just their sensibilities and the way that they learned from other directors and filmmakers and editors. Like you can see the Soviet montage editing of Pudovkin and
Eisenstein.
Eisenstein uh, in this one section, in several sections. Um, the especially like there's one I think debauchery scene where there's like a piano and it's all montaged and superimposed, and the gawking sequence. It's absolutely impressive to
And
see.
this was the pinnacle of German expressionism.
Yeah, yeah. This was the
German
this was it.
this is German expressionism 101 because basically German expressionism is seen through a lot of angular images,
Hmm.
overwrought images. If you've ever seen the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, those weird backgrounds,
Was it
you know,
Robert Veen
yeah.
and Murnau's Nosferatu?
Mm.
Uh, oh, Murnau's
If you ever
Nosferatu.
see, it's a really really interesting period
Yeah,
to get into.
it's this oversized sets to illustrate uh, production and items overshadowing humanity, and just this skewed look at everything, this off center, off kilter look at just about everything. It's
It's what the Germans were
gorgeous.
going to see at the time when they weren't watching mountain climbing films.
Right.
They were goofy for mountain climbing
They
movies. I mean,
were. They were. What
if
was
you've
it?
ever seen Leni Riefenstahl's films before she started working for Hitler, it was a
The
lot of mountain climbing
what was
pictures.
it? Like the mountains of Pitzpalau, I think, was one of them,
It's
and
blue, yeah,
Pitzpalau, yeah,
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 and
yeah.
the blue light.
Yeah.
I've seen those films. They're all the same.
Yeah.
They're breathtaking to look at, but my God, they're all the same. How many times can you watch? How many times can you watch Germans climb mountains? I mean,
Apparently a lot if you're German and there's nothing else to do on a Saturday night.
well, and let's talk also about the times that this took place in, because Germany at the time was this. This was just after. This was almost a decade after the end of World War One.
Mhm.
We were in the middle of the Weimar Republic,
Mhm.
and basically the Weimar Republic was when the Kaiser went into exile. um, the democratic government was declared in 1919 at a small town called Weimar,
Hmm.
and it's where a lot of and at this time a lot of schools of thought were coming together. The communists and Marxists
Hmm.
and all of these. It was all kinds of the political structure of Germany was
Right.
so complicated at the
And
time.
it's
There
and
were like
it's
38 different political parties at the time.
and it's 2 years before the Depression.
Yeah, yeah. So
So,
a lot of art was coming out of this.
right.
A lot of great art was coming out
Hmm.
of this.
Yeah.
And so their filmmaking, the German expressionists, came out of that.
Hmm.
And they always seemed to be commenting on the world at large.
Right.
And a lot of people who've seen because of what happened, and Fritz Lang denied this, uh, saw this as things to come.
Hmm.
You know, the idea of what the Nazis would do to Germany
Hmm.
over the next decade or decade and a half. And when you see this film and you see that image of the workers in uniforms,
Hmm.
little caps on, and they're shuffling in unison toward the gate, toward the elevator, and you see on the other side workers who look exactly the same, and they're
Hmm.
shuffling the other way.
Right.
They're leaving work.
Right.
You can only think of what would happen to the minorities in Germany in the
Right.
years to come.
Right.
I
And
mean,
the forced
it's a
labor
very bold,
camps and
right,
all of
forced
that.
labor camps, concentration camps, that kind of
And
thing. Although Lang denied it, denied really knowing what was going on.
well, because it wasn't
He
really
said
going on yet.
because it wasn't going on yet. Germany was thriving.
Yeah.
Germany was thriving, you know, but it was politically it was a mess.
I mean, it was difficult because of the economic sanctions that were put on them thanks to the Treaty of Versailles. Uh,
Right.
that they
They
were
got nothing because they were the losers.
right. They were suffering because of that, and but they were still doing well culturally, and they weren't as downtrodden as when they had to pay their tributes, and the depression had hit, and the
And one of the biggest problems is that during the war, um, people back home in Germany, the media was feeding them a lot of the news that
hmm.
Germany was winning the war.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, in 1919, they lose.
Yeah.
So there became this idea from the right, this conspiracy that the left that it was because of something that happened because of the people on the left.
Mm.
And there became these revolutions because of that.
Hmm.
And out of that sprung a lot of fringe groups, a lot of smaller groups. One of them being the German Workers' Labor Party, which Hitler joined, and it became the Nazi Party. And a lot of people joined it. It was not the evil entity that it would become later,
Don't be stupid. Be a schmarty. Come and join the Nazi Party.
basically. Basically. And
Springtime for
so when Hitler becomes chancellor in 1933, um, he wants to hire a filmmaker to make films for the right.
Hmm.
And he picks Fritz Lang. Joseph Goebbels calls him in. There is an interview. It is fascinating. There's an interview that is conducted by uh,
William Friedkin.
William Friedkin, and he's talking to Fritz Lang. And Fritz Lang gives this such detail about the time he was called in to talk to Joseph Goebbels. He goes in to talk to Joseph Goebbels, and Fritz Lang, I was surprised that he said this. He told him, he said, my mother was raised Catholic, but her parents were Jewish. And Goebbels just kind of looked at him and he said, Mr. Lang, we will decide who is Aryan and who is not.
Oh, oh. Ugh.
I had to stop the interview for a
Ugh.
second because I was like, wow.
Yikes.
So they were willing to forgive his Jewish heritage because he was such a great filmmaker. And he left for Paris that night.
Yeah.
And he went back, but he went back to his apartment. And as he's getting his things together, he looks out the window and he sees these military men surrounding the building. And he thinks he's going to be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out they were just on maneuvers. They just happened to be there. He got on the train and he went to Paris, and eventually ended up in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
that was
he made some good pictures over here. He made some great
he did.
pictures over here.
One of which
Actually.
we're going to talk about later, which is Scarlet Street.
Yeah. Also, The Woman in the Window. Uh, Western Union was a pretty good western he directed. Yeah, I mean he did well over here. And then
American Gorilla in the Philippines was pretty good.
mm-hmm.
Spies, which is a wonderful movie. I love that movie to death. I've only seen it once, but it is really, really good. And M,
Mm-hmm.
of course. M is wonderful. It's really worth getting into his work.
It is. He's absolutely magnificent. There's one movie of his that I feel ashamed that I have not seen, and it is uh, the silent version of the Siegfried opera. I can't pronounce.
Nibelung?
Yeah, that one. I have not seen it. It's like 4.5 hours long in two
Yeah.
parts. I've seen the both parts of Dr. Mabuse, Der Spieler,
Mm.
um, and but I have yet to get around to Die Nibelung. It's just I feel sad that I haven't seen it. I think I've even seen Spiders, but not.
Never seen Spider.
That's a weird one.
Um, when I saw this movie a few years ago, I got this weird obsession with Bridget Helm, who played Maria.
Okay.
Chiefly, chiefly because at the time she was still living.
Oh.
And so I started, when you're interested in when you see an actor that kind of captivates you sort of get interested in their work.
Yeah.
Well, last night I found a movie that I'd never heard of, and it was called Gloria. It was made in 1931,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a domestic drama, very rare domestic drama that she was in, where she plays the wife of an aviator played by Gustav Froelich,
Oh.
who also plays Frater in this movie.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. The copy I found is in German with no subtitles.
Oh.
So there's a lot of dialogue. I just kind of had to piece it together. What I got from it is they're a domestic couple. She's a housewife, and he spends more time on his planes than he does spending time with her.
Hmm.
And I think he suspects that she's running around with other men. Isn't it interesting? I couldn't understand a word of this, but I could sort of piece it together, just kind of based on what I saw. Because the movie's it's a talkie,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the first time I'd ever heard her voice, and she has a very high pitched voice,
Mm.
and but it was just interesting. It's like I can figure out what this movie's about, and I have no idea because I can't understand a word they're saying. But um, what's it's like Metropolis for me was like Frankenstein,
Mhm.
in that it got me interested in other older films, and it got me interested in wanting to see other films. In particular, and I never thought I would do this, German films.
Mm-hmm.
I got interested in the films of Fritz Lang. I got interested in the films of G.W. Past. I got interested in the films of F.W. Murnau. What's his name? Von Stroheim.
Oh, Eric von Stroheim. Yeah.
Eric von Stroheim. Yeah, I got interested in it's interesting that a movie
Well,
that you love can be a gateway to other great films.
they're all great filmmakers. Pabst Three Penny Opera is remarkable.
So it's
Uh,
Pandora's box.
yeah, and Pandora's Box is so good.
It is
Uh,
so good. Boy, the ending of that movie. Boy,
that
the ending of that
is
movie is bleak.
that is yeah, yeah, it is. Uh, and I mean, of course, von Stroheim. Most he of course came over here and ended up his career as an actor, but uh, yeah, his stuff and Murnau, Nosferatu, Sunrise: A Tale of Two Humans is probably one of the most beautiful silent movies
It is.
ever. Uh, it's interesting, yeah, exactly. That you see this one movie and you're like, well, let me see what else this person has done, and that's kind of how I fell for Fritz Lang. M was the first Lang movie I ever saw.
Oh god, that movie.
And I went off of that, and over time, because I saw his a lot of his American work, um, when he showed up in Godard's Contempt in was it 71 or 66 or something with Bridget Bardot, and
Yeah,
he's playing himself, a version of himself. Uh, you know, he seemed to have such a wonderful humor about himself,
yeah,
and he was a great visionary. The sets that he created for this film, um, you've never seen anything. You have seen things like it because every science fiction anything after this has copied some element of this movie. Uh, like I said, George Lucas took his idea for Coruscant, the city planet in the Star Wars prequels, directly. You can see Coruscant in Metropolis.
you
Uh,
see Blade Runner
you can see Blade Runner all over Metropolis. You can see,
and
uh,
Metropolis came from Metropolis.
yes,
Jerry Siegel and Joe Schuster. That's where they got the name.
hmm and
It's their way of honoring.
even uh, Aldous Huxley, when he wrote Brave New World, you can see elements of Metropolis in Brave New World, which was written. I think it was published in 1936, but I might be wrong on that. So he took the caste system, but he made it alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon,
Right.
and they were genetically altered so that the epsilons were made to be intellectually inferior so that they wouldn't be upset that they were janitors.
Right.
Um, Things like that, and the alphas were basically the upper caste that you see here, and you it's really fascinating to see how this film has rippled out, um, and has been so influential, uh, to not only to science fiction but other films as well. A lot to do with German music has spilled from this. Uh, 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 there's uh, there's a lot of imagery and stuff that was used in commercials and music videos, and
Oh God, music videos.
I mean,
Oh
there's
wow.
so I mean, if you look at engineering on the original Star Trek TV series, it looks like the machine room
Mhm.
in Metropolis, and
Everything. Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the
hmm
Worlds.
yeah,
Just anything that would come along. Planet of the Apes, even. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
you know, you can see so many influences, and yet, this is a movie that very few people seek out.
yeah,
They've
which is
heard of it,
weird.
which is weird, and I think it has to do with the fact that it is a silent film. I hate that. I hate that that barrier is there.
it's just like watching a foreign film. Is like you forget that you're reading after a little while. You
The
forget that.
imagery captivates you so much you don't even notice it really.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's it's absolutely it's gorgeous, and absolutely find it on the Kino Lorber Blu-ray,
Mm-hmm. The
because
ultimate edition.
oh man, it's called the Complete Metropolis. It was the 2010 remaster. It looks stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. I would question if anybody has seen it this good since it was screened on 35 in 1927.
Yeah.
Like it's
There's a
spectacular.
bunch of different versions of this. But like I said, the one I saw was the unfortunately it was the 84-minute version. Um, I bothered the people at Blockbuster to buy that one only because the only one that was available to me was from Good Times Video. Good Times Video.
We've
Boy,
talked
that's a
about Good Times Video before.
oh, that's a it was a they would sell you VHS copies for $1, and I mean it looked like it.
And you got everything you paid for, yeah.
You got everything. You got your dollar's worth. You know, I look at the edition that's on DVD in my store, and it's about $25,
Mhm.
and it's worth 20, and it's worth paying $25 for.
Mhm.
But Good Times Video, when they sell you a VHS for 99 cents, that's pretty much what you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 99 cents worth of movie,
Yeah.
and it inspired me to go back to that Blockbuster and talk to the manager. Like, I'd really like to buy this movie from you.
How much did you have to pay for it?
I think maybe I had to pay about $10,
That sounds about
something
right.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's an old VHS, and I mean it's sitting on. But it's sitting on. It's sitting on the shelf, and it's like, the box is all beat up, and nobody's renting the thing.
Right, right, right.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, would you mind to sell it to me? And he did. And I watched it over and over and over again. And I had a bunch of friends, and I got them together to watch it. And they were kind of captivated by it as much as they could be. I think maybe they were humoring me, but you can't watch a movie like this and not get caught up in some of the imagery, even
I
if you're not in.
it's you'd be hard pressed to just not feel anything on this one. Um, it 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 kind of it just pulls you in, and because there's no uh, pussyfooting around the plot, they just get straight
No,
into it. And you think, how is this going to be 2.5 hours? I could figure out that this is going to wrap up in 30 minutes. Like they just hit the plot
well,
points so
we blew through
fast.
the story in 20. So.
But the way that it's put together, the way that it's acted, the way that it's visualized and represented, it fills out that 2.5 hours, and you don't feel like it's gone by. Like,
Yeah.
I started watching it, like I said, last night, and I got like 45 minutes in, and it was late, and I started to fall asleep because I was just tired because
Yeah.
it was really late at night. And I'm like,
You texted me this morning, and you're like, I got 30 minutes to go, and I'm thinking, when did you get up? I'm thinking it was like 9 in the morning, and he texted me. He says I got 30 minutes to go, and I'm thinking, okay, if I do the math right, that means he got up about 6 a.m. and started watching this.
well, I watched 45 minutes the night before, and then I watched about an hour of it after I got my son on the bus, and then I watched the last bit of it a little bit later, right when you would message to me that
It's not a
you were
movie
getting
that you
ready.
just put on when you just want to kill some time.
No,
It's not a movie like that.
you
You
have to
really
focus on this.
you have to focus on it. It's like a foreign film. It makes you watch it. You have to sit there and
Yeah,
watch it.
yeah, yeah. You can't, you won't know what's going on if you look away for
Yeah,
5 minutes, two
yeah.
minutes. Leave your
I
phone in
didn't.
another room because
Yeah, yeah. You have to sort it does, and I think that's why a lot of people don't seek it out because it does make you focus on it
Mm-hmm.
because it is a silent film, and that's the way it
Right.
is with all silent films.
Yeah.
But if you can give yourself over to it, if you're willing to give yourself over to it, it is an
Mm-hmm.
incredible experience.
Yeah.
Silent films in general are an incredible experience if you're willing to give yourself over to them.
That's true. I always have the same reticence to starting a silent film as I do a foreign film because I'm like, do I have the time to sit and watch this? Put everything else aside so that I
Right.
can focus on this. And usually the answer is either no, I don't have the time, or I think I'm too tired to sit here and pay that close attention, or there's other stuff that I could watch that doesn't require that kind of concentration, so that
Yeah.
usually gets pushed to the side, which is why it took me 6 or 7 years to finally get around to watching this particular cut of a movie that I really enjoyed the first time I saw it and I had owned. I literally spent money on it and never put it in my player. The closest I got to seeing it was watching a TCM special when when the they were about ready to debut it, and it was about the restoration and how it got found and everything, which I believe is on the Blu-ray.
Mhm.
And I watched that because I was fascinated at this uh, discovery, and but I
Because
just
there's nothing else like it.
yeah, I just didn't get to the movie. And I'm like, I need to watch that. And then I'd be going through my movie collection and I'd look at it and I'm like, I gotta watch this. And I didn't. So,
There's always a moment when I'm watching any film that really changes my life. What is the moment that you really realize that you're watching something spectacular? What is the moment when you realize that this moment has got you, when this movie's got you? And that was the moment when the machine exploded.
yeah. Yeah, I would
And
say for me it was when they gave you that kind of the external of the city with the trains going around and the biplanes kind of fly it around. It's like,
that
yeah,
biplane in the city, yeah,
that kind of dates it. Like, really, there's not going to be biplanes rolling around, but you could easily replace those if you made this today. You could easily replace that with maglev trains and flying cars, anti-grav cars, uh, and update the machinery and stuff. But it's that struck me. I'm like, okay, this is just. I was floored that that was done in 1927.
mm.
You
Well,
know,
the exploding of the machinery uh, knocks Freighter in the head,
yeah,
and he looks up and he sees this machine, and it looks like a giant monster
right.
with
It
its mouth
turns into
open.
like some demon or something.
And the workers are walking up the stairs, and as they walk up the stairs, they're falling into his mouth.
Right.
And I'm just like, okay, you got me.
Yeah.
You got me. Okay, this movie, and then he has later on, he's locked in a room, and he has a vision of the Grim Reaper
Yeah.
with the thresher with the side, and he's
With the
whipping it
seven
back and
with
forth.
the seven deadly sins
Right,
off to each
right,
each side of it, and the death is in the middle. Uh, yeah, and he envisions them coming to life, and
right.
the Grim Reaper, and he makes a plea to the seven deadly sins. He says, yesterday you wouldn't have scared me, but today I beseech you not to not to uh, affect me and my love.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that uh, it's very powerful. It's pretty naive, but it's also very powerful. It kind of expresses how Frater really doesn't know anything about anything,
Right.
but this is his like crash course in humanity.
Apparently, they don't have a lot of communication because the kids of the rich people don't know anything about this. Um, they're they're just babes in the woods. They don't know anything about the people underground.
Right, and despite the fact that if this had kept up, they would have been the ones that would have had to end up running things
Yeah, yeah.
in not a very long, not very long after this, because this was a time when every father of a 20-year-old was like 68.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you get to the father, you get to the Yo Fraterson, and I mean he looks like he's in his 60s,
Yeah, yeah.
and his son looks like he's in his 20s, and it's God, I could go on talking about this for hours because it is it's such a visual experience, and all of it and almost all of it biblical. I mean
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the imagery, and you could take a page out of the Bible and just paste it to this movie because it's, I mean you've got you've got the Christ-like figure, you've got Sodom and Gomorrah, you've got
hmm
the seven deadly sins, the Tower of Babylon. I mean, it's all there. You know,
Yeah.
it's just incredible.
It's really remarkable, and yet at the same time, it could be looked upon as a socialist allegory.
Yeah, yeah,
Which the
or even a
basis.
communist allegory.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the basis of socialism is rooted in the teachings of Jesus, or the teachings in Jesus's name. Uh, so I mean, that's really where the root of it all came from. So it was interesting sitting there watching it, realizing that it was really only 6 years out from Hitler,
Yeah,
and you realize that this picture could not have been made
hmm
uh, after Hitler's ascendancy to the chancellorship.
this
And
movie
the
came along at the right time because it was right between the two world wars,
hmm
and you couldn't have made it before
no,
for
no,
the First World War.
no.
You couldn't have made it after 1933 when Hitler took over. It just it fits right in the right time. This is
hmm
1927, Weimar Republic, and it speaks to the world at large at the time and the
Yeah.
world that was on its way.
hmm Yeah. So I mean, absolutely. If you haven't seen it, see it. Our plot summary uh, does not do the film justice in any degree. It'll just give you kind of a primer for what's coming next. It's kind of like how I ultimately was able to finish reading Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities only after I saw the movie and found out what the book was actually about, because it
Mhm.
doesn't actually reveal what it's about until like the last 10 pages.
Right.
Like it's just a bunch of people talking and doing stuff that has nothing to do with anything until the very end. It's like the side character becomes the most important character in the whole thing. And I'm
Right.
like, well, now that I know what I'm supposed to be getting from this, I can finish the book. And I did. I read it like in a week after I was like 50 pages in, and I just plowed through the rest of it once I knew what it was about. So hopefully, knowing some of the stuff that we went over uh, entices you into seeing this. What are your
And
recommendations?
also get into the German Expressionist movement
Oh
because
yeah,
this ended with the rise of the Nazi era.
yeah, yeah,
Well, next week is your choice, and we
yes.
are taking our first trip into the world of Federico Fellini with your choice. We are talking about one of his most personal films. They're all personal films. It is called
Amarcord.
Amarcord.
I love this movie. Uh, Absolutely adore it. It's probably my favorite Fellini picture. I like Fellini a lot more than Jerry does. Uh,
Uh, Fellini, a lot of it doesn't capture me. This one did. This one did.
It's an excellent picture. Um, what are your recommendations based off of Metropolis?
Go to YouTube and watch this interview with that William Friedkin did with Fritz Lang, because he talks about this film. He talks about M. He talks about Dr. Mabuse, and he talks about a lot of what happened to his career because of Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
and what he went through. It's a very good, but also somewhat combative interview,
Mm-hmm.
because Friedkin drives a lot of questions at him about, did you see any atrocities? What was the meaning of this
Mm-hmm.
film? And it's
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. It's a really almost sort of hostile interview, but it is fascinating. I'll post a link to it.
Okay.
What do you got?
Well, uh, gosh, uh, the movies that I've mentioned, the Lang movies that I've mentioned, Doctor Mabuse, uh, the Testament of Doctor Mabuse, M, which will be an episode, I promise. Um, his American stuff. I mean, he was just a world class filmmaker. And check out the documentary about the restoration of this picture. Uh, it's a fascinating watch. I think it's under an hour.
What's it
Um,
called?
uh, if I had the
Sorry.
Blu-ray up here in my office, I would be able to tell you right off, but I don't know.
We'll post a
um,
link to it.
yeah, so definitely check that out, and German Expressionism, and I mean, any of the movies that we mentioned that came after that. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey owes a huge debt to this picture. This
This is Batman, Blade Runner, Dark
Batman, Blade
City.
Runner, the Dark City, the Star Wars saga, I mean, Star Trek. I mean, just about anything uh, owes a debt. Anything science fiction owes a debt to the look. Um, Practically anything political owes a lot to the way that this the political machinations that are behind this. So, it's absolutely stunning. It is single handedly one of the most influential movies ever made. Uh, Definitely anything you can get your hands on that's related to it. I even think that there's a 2001 anime that they
Oh, I
adapted.
have. It's from 2000. It is great.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's called Metropolis. It's
Yeah.
loosely based on this.
So I think that about wraps it up for us here on the Pod Bay Doors. Uh, I am Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. And on behalf of Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com, we thank you very much for tuning in to listen to us talk about this magnificent film. You can find all of our back episodes on the web at how long has it been since you've actually heard it called the web?
The interwebs.
On at www.thepodbaydoorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find all of the episodes and all of the links that we say that we're going to post with these episodes there. We thank you very much. Give us your likes, your comments, anything that you would like to see us try to work into our schedule. We'll be very happy to, if need be, amend our future schedule, which we make far too far out in advance. Um, Join us next week, like we said, for Amarcord, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission had been completed.